All right, this is Rodrigo Fuentes with Listen Loop, and I'm here with Justine from Litmus. And Justine, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Litmus and what your role is there.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rodrigo. My name is Justine Jordan. I'm the VP of Marketing at Litmus. And so Litmus is a SaaS software company. We build tools that help people make email better. And that's kind of a big, broad umbrella. And we help people make email better through a lot of different testing and analytics and spam filter tools. So I think every email marketer or any digital marketer out there that's ever had to press send in their email tool has experienced what we call the fear at Litmus. And that's this idea that once you press send, everything's kind of out of your control. If there's a broken link, if there's a broken image, if the email looks bad, if it's going to go at someone's spam filter, there's all these anxieties that you don't know that could go wrong with the email. And so Litmus aims to ease all those anxieties by helping you make sure that your email is ready to send. So by pre-send testing, spam filter testing, we even have some post-send analytics, a builder tool, a lot of stuff like that. And so my role at Litmus is all about marketing those tools. So thought leadership, research, advertising, events, you name it. I lead our marketing team that helps get the word out about Litmus.
So there's an old saying, right? An actor's actor. You're in a sense, you're a marketer's marketer. You gotta pitch to marketers. You gotta sell to marketers.
Marketing to marketers is really hard.
That's tough.
Especially, our audience has really high expectations. For instance, so say that we're sending an email about responsive design. We're sending an email about responsive email. And that email, well, people expect that it's responsive, right?
Yep.
So people really want to see that we're practicing what we're preaching, and so it brings the expectations for our own marketing program up to a level that is pretty tough to attain sometimes. So, but we try to do well by our audience and our subscribers. So
that's awesome. So our audience is often, also marketers, but those particularly interested in business to business circumstances, and one of the things that I think marketers in general is how to stay at the cutting edge of marketing, how to use technology to do their jobs better, faster, more efficiently. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective, what are some of the latest innovations in email marketing analytics?
Sure. I mean, if you're looking at email marketing, just the analytics behind it in particular, you hear all these trends about, big data and all these different data sources. And I think that bringing that down to a practical level is actually really difficult. A lot of marketers are chasing this mythical idea of having, an omni-channel experience where consumers or your audience is always having the best experience, or data from every channel is influencing all the other channels in their experience. And it's a noble goal because frankly, it's what people expect out of marketers today. But on a practical level, it's very, very difficult to obtain. And so you do see more and more innovations happening there, though, to make it easier to obtain. The other thing, people have this idea that email is dead sometimes, and really it's one of a marketer's best performing channels, especially digital channels, because it's one of the few channels that the marketer controls. In your Facebook feed or in any other, even like LinkedIn, there's algorithms that really you don't have control over as a marketer. But with email, you control the audience, you control the timing, you control the exposure. And so with email marketing in particular, the analytics themselves haven't changed a great deal over the years. Opens, clicks, conversions. One of the unique metrics that you can track these days is actually like attention span, or what we call duration of engagement. And that's how long is someone actually keeping the email open for. And that's something, in full disclosure, this is some of the features of our email analytics product that we have at Litmus. We can also track prints, like who's printing the email or who's forwarding it. And that can be helpful, like in brick and mortar or like point of sale situations. If you have someone that's, printing coupons, or even in B2B, like really long newsletters or really kind of outdated industries where you might have a lot of individuals or a demographic that prefers to read printed emails. I've seen that more frequently than I would have ever expected.
That reminds me of my old law firm days. Oh boy.
Yeah, well, I was on a plane the other day and I literally saw a man get on with a briefcase that was full of printed off emails, and he had a process. He had like the stack on the left, which was like the input stack, and he would pick up the email and he would read it, and as he was done, he would fold it in half and then put it in the other stack to his right. So it was this very manual inbox zeroing process that I was witnessing on a plane.
I bet I wouldn't be surprised if he was making notes on it and giving them to an assistant to type out responses.
Yeah, exactly. So there are, like I said, some innovations there, and on the really steep end of the innovation curve when it comes to email is things like measuring interactivity in email. One of the biggest things that we've seen at Litmus is, in terms of just innovation in the email space in the last year, has been interactivity. So if you can imagine this idea of taking what typically is a landing page or a website experience and bringing it into the email itself, more and more people are experimenting with that, but it's also really difficult to track because of the other limitations in email. But there's making some really innovative companies are making some headway there too. So yeah.
That's very interesting to me, the idea of tracking engagement with an email open. And I assume it's a matter of tracking how long an email has been open. Is that right?
That's correct. So we call it like duration of engagement, or even like attention span. So there's a few different ways you can do it, but our platform tracks the number of seconds that the email remains open, up to 20 seconds. So.
Wow, that's fascinating. Let me switch to a topic that you mentioned in your last response here. It was this idea that email is dead. I've certainly heard that at some of the conferences in 2016. And I mean, I always shake my head because email, at least for many B2B marketers, is often one of the first go-to channels for engaging with a target buyer.
Yeah.
Whether it's inbound or even targeted outbound sales approaches. The reason I bring this up is that I also read another article that was comparing email to advertising. And the idea was that by sending these really targeted emails to, let's call it 10,000 recipients, right? The net effect was effectively advertising to those people, your the company's brand. And what they were comparing is the idea that ads, some people will say that people have banner blindness these days, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the article was trying to draw a parallel between banner blindness, this idea that you kind of sort of half see an ad on, let's say, CNN.com, and what they were calling email blindness. This similar idea that you kind of half see the sender and maybe the first 50 characters of a subject line, but maybe that's it. And that rung somewhat true with me, in the sense that my morning routine often consists of I'm really big on hotkeys. So in Gmail, it's J or K to go up and down the emails, X to mark them, and E to archive them. And within about 30 seconds, I can clean out 75% of the inbound email to my inbox by just looking at the senders, looking at the subject lines, and being like, nope, not interested in even reading it. What are your thoughts on that comparison between kind of banner blindness, email blindness, and what you're seeing as trends in the industry when you actually have the analytics to see if this is a thing or not?
Yeah, that's an interesting sort of parallel you draw there. And I would say that I don't think that the comparison between banner blindness and email blindness really carries a lot of weight. Because to your point, if that were true, email wouldn't be such a valuable revenue generating channel. Now, Litmus doesn't track like opens and clicks per se, because we're not actually sending the emails. We partner with companies, like the MailChimps and the Constant Contacts of the world, and they have some really great stats around email engagement overall over the years. And frankly, despite email volumes increasing, so people are getting more email, engagement, especially for brands that do email well, is steady. It's great. And that's again why it's such a valuable channel, is because I don't want to say nothing's happening there, because people that don't treat email as a respected digital marketing tool, your engagement will go down because you're not sending engaging campaigns. But yeah, I think this idea that there's a blindness there doesn't hold a lot of water when a lot of marketers' statistics say otherwise. But the point you brought up about like going through your inbox really quickly, I was trying to find. So my colleague Chad White, our research director here at Litmus, just did a study with Fluent where they surveyed something like 1,500, maybe 1,000 or so, like US adults, and asked them, like, what's the first thing you look at when you decide whether or not to open an email? And if you think about your typical inbox, there's like the from name, the subject line, and this thing called preview text that some inboxes show you, which is like the little bit of text after the subject line. And so 42% of people said that they look at the from name first. So that idea you were saying about like scanning your inbox and really quickly deleting, it's actually your from name that's most important. Then it's your subject line, and then it's your preview text. So having a really strong like brand presence and a relationship with that brand, I think could go a long way there, because people are looking at the from name.
You're already making me think I need to A/B test changing my first name to "Don't Delete Me" and see how that performs.
And that's the funny thing too. Like I was ranting on stage, I think actually at the event where we met recently, about I have a screenshot of a bunch of subject lines that are like marketers practically begging the recipient, like, don't delete, like, open me now. And that's really disappointing to see too, because, if we're doing email right, again, if we're treating it as a respected channel that has a really high ROI for our business, then we would have a better strategy than looking desperate in the inbox by begging, don't delete me.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you a question. You're talking about treating email with respect as a channel. I like that concept. What do you make of the whole predictable revenue that's I think came to its peak in maybe 2015, and we're still seeing a lot of it in 2016? This idea that, the cold outbound sales emails, it's so funky. It's at the point really where I think all of us are receiving 10 of these a day, and they all have that similar feel about them. I don't know how to describe it other than they're almost cookie cutter in a way, but the structure and the ethos around the emails are very similar. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
I see it a lot with, I think I know what you're talking about, like the B2B sales, or just B2B marketing emails in particular. And I think what that is I don't want to call it a lack of respect, because that's kind of judging the marketers themselves. And I have a lot of respect for marketers because they usually have a lot going on. They're wearing a lot of hats. I'm a marketer too, and I can relate. But I think what it comes down to is that email is perceived as easy. A lot of marketers are looking for a way to streamline their jobs and get their work done faster. And that we're looking at but everyone's looking for a playbook. They're looking for the easiest way to get the most that they can out of their marketing. And they don't usually spend the time to take a more strategic look at their program. And like I said, and that's not a commentary on the ability of the marketer. It's usually a commentary on they have too much on their plate.
Yes, with all of us having to use 15 different pieces of software to get the job done, it's overwhelming sometimes, right?
Exactly.
Well, let me change tack here and ask you, what are some of the differences that you're seeing between B2B versus B2C email deliverability? Prince?
Yeah, so email delivery is a tricky one too, because there's not always this clear delineation between like B2B versus B2C, because an inbox is an inbox. There's some differences, right? In B2B, you're going to have a lot of like corporate side filters like Barracuda or even Outlook's own like native filter. Whereas in the B2C, you're dealing with say like Gmail's spam filtering algorithm. But here's the part where the lines are starting to get really, really blurry. So products like G Suite, it used to be called Google Apps, products like Microsoft's Outlook 365 are continually blurring the lines between business and consumer email products. And more businesses are moving to cloud-based services like the Google and the Microsoft, like cloud-based products to manage their corporate email communications.
Mhm.
And so because of that, you see more and more what would typically be considered a B2B sort of email environment being managed by what was used to be seen as B2C emailing infrastructure, which is the Googles, right? Or the Gmail. So that being said, the consumer based filters, right, like the Gmails of the universe, are highly engagement driven. So what's going to affect deliverability there isn't necessarily something that's content driven. So say you have free in your subject line. That's a really common myth. Like if you put free in your subject line, you're going to get put in the spam folder. Instead, what the Gmails of the world and these more sophisticated algorithms are looking at is the engagement of the audience. So if you have people that are opening emails regularly, tagging, putting them in folders, forwarding, replying. So not the typical marketers and inbox providers measure engagement differently. So what we think of as engagement, opens, clicks, conversions, that's not what they're looking at. They're looking at other types of engagement that we can't measure, which seems a bit unfair, right? How can we tell how to improve our deliverability if we don't have any insight into what the inbox providers are looking at? And so that's what I see. If you wanted to say like a trend or a difference between the two, is how they're looking at that. Whereas a lot of the more slower to innovate, like B2B, like corporate kind of spam filters that you install on a server somewhere, aren't as engagement based. They tend to have very specific rules that you can install or configure and that then you then follow. But reputation is a factor in either case as well, like your sending reputation.
Right. I like one of the takeaways I got from what we were just saying is this idea that the systems that can be installed across multiple companies, Gmails or the Microsoft Outlooks of the world that are kind of web-based, can learn from activities across multiple companies, whereas sort of on-premise email infrastructures, right, seem to be limited to whatever learning can take place, if any, company. So there is I could definitely see the value in those two different systems.
Yeah, and again, it's just I think eventually you're going to see more and more companies moving to those cloud-based solutions. We've seen a lot of evidence of that over the past few years, so we'll see if that continues in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me, how does Litmus fit into the B2B company's marketing technology stack? I personally have used it myself. Making sure that my email looks right across many different browsers and clients. But maybe there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I always say that when people ask about Litmus's audience or how we fit into different sort of verticals, I always say that anyone that sends email should use Litmus. And it's for that reason I described earlier, like anyone that's pressing send, I think has just felt that fear. If you've made a mistake, you've sent an email, it goes to your CMO or your boss's spam filter, it goes to your spam filter, you get a report from a customer that they opened it in, Lotus Notes and it looked terrible, or there was a broken link. Like those are all like really terrible feelings that lead you to say like, how could I have prevented this? Like, how could I have stopped this from happening? Again, I am biased, but the answer is you use Litmus. It's super simple. It doesn't matter what mailing tool you're using. You could be using, MailChimp or something more sophisticated, like one of the marketing clouds that are out there. And all you do is send us a test email. So I think a lot of digital marketers will send themselves a test and they'll kind of click the link. So they'll be like, oh, I opened this in my Outlook and it looked okay. And nothing looked broken. And so I'm going to go ahead and send it to everybody. But in reality, like just because you're looking at it in Outlook doesn't mean that whoever you're sending it to is opening it in Outlook. Even if you are B2B, again, a lot of these people are moving to Gmail. So as long as you can send a test email to yourself, you can send a test email to Litmus, and we'll run it through this battery of tests and make sure that it's ready to send.
I mean, it just blows my mind. How did we do it before Litmus came around? I mean, it was
a lot of manual work.
A lot of manual, yeah. I remember I used to have to send it, open it up on my Apple client, open it up in Outlook. Oh, God. We're talking about challenges. Let me switch questions here and ask you, what are one or two of the biggest challenges you're facing as a marketer as we go into 2017?
Oh gosh. As a marketer, I think the challenges that are out there can be really, really diverse. For us at Litmus, we're a relatively small team, and it's really about thinking, how do we prioritize? As any business, we have aggressive growth goals. We want to expand. We want to make more money. And usually a lot of businesses want to do that with the same budget or the same number of teammates or the same resources. And so I think, prioritization is tricky. Allocation of resources, budgets are tricky. So nothing new to marketers. And also I always feel like marketers in general are looking at all the next best thing. They're looking at trends and they're saying, what's the next shiny object I can go and experiment with or try to help us reach our goals. And that's tricky too, because I love experimentation. I love innovation. I love trying new things. But at the same time, I also see a lot of folks spinning their wheels and trying things that don't have the ROI. And then frankly, that's why I'm such an email advocate, is that it's worked. It's worked for years. It's dependable. It might not be very sexy, but it's, I keep coming back to where do you get the most bang for your buck? Where am I going to get my ROI? Where can I have the most impact without having to spend more time and money than I already am? So that's, I think, a big challenge for everybody. And it's definitely a challenge that we're looking at right now too.
Yeah, you mentioned it's not a new challenge. So I'm curious, what's the best tip for doing more with less that you've experienced in your career?
Oh gosh. The best tip for doing more with less. So I'm a big perfectionist, and it's something that I am proud of, but is also one of those things that's a blessing and a curse, or a double-edged sword. And so for me, it's sometimes remembering that good enough is plenty. That it doesn't need to be perfect. What is that quote? That perfect is the enemy of good. Mm-hmm. So I think if any marketer out there is faced with trying to do more with less, I think remembering that perfect is the enemy of good is a good mantra that I try to keep in mind.
Unless it's checking emails, of course, they should be perfect across all systems.
Well, even there, I would say no. We actually, a fun story from inside the trenches at Litmus. We sent an email. We did this really beautiful year in review infographic on our website that talked about how much we'd grown and how many products we releases and how many people we'd hired and all that kind of really beautiful work by the teams here. And we thought, we're going to try something new. One of those times where we decided to take a risk and be innovative and try an infographic in an email. And because we were kind of crunched for time, but also because we knew our audience and we were making some strategic decisions here about what was going to look where, the email wasn't perfect in Outlook. And we knew that. And we sent it because we knew that we were taking a little bit of a risk. And the feedback that we got from our audience, we had some people reply, again, the high expectations when you market to marketers. Some people replied and said, hey, I can't believe that as Litmus, you didn't test this email, it's broken in my Outlook. And so in fact, we had tested it. So we ended up putting up a a post in our community that explained why we sent the email knowing that it was going to look that way. And it was in the name of innovation. It was in the name of experimentation and trying something new. And we knew it wasn't perfect. So I think there are trade-offs like that where, again, doing more with less. If you know your audience and you understand the risks, then you can do more, and take the gamble with the risk as long as you understand it.
I love that. That was a great anecdote. Thanks for sharing that. That was really cool. Let me change courses here again, and we talked about challenges, but I'm curious, what's the most interesting thing you've learned about marketing in the last year?
The most interesting thing I have learned about marketing in the last year, I would say, I was actually really inspired by a couple of colleagues, actually, Lauren McDonald and Ann Handley. So Lauren is kind of a product evangelist over at IBM and their marketing cloud. And then Ann Handley, if you haven't heard of her already, is an author and the chief content officer over at Marketing Profs and an excellent advocate of wonderful writing. She wrote a book called Everybody Writes. And they both had kind of pointed out to me, or pointed out in some retrospective posts that they wrote, I think also is one of the most interesting things I've learned is that marketers have kind of forgotten how to market to some extent. It's that idea I talked about earlier about wanting to follow a playbook, or sometimes maybe being a little bit too overwhelmed by our own jobs, or maybe even getting like desperate to reach a KPI and putting please do not delete in your subject line. And it's that, sometimes we're a little bit KPI blind, or we've forgotten how to actually like build a relationship, like build a brand. There's so much content marketing out there. There's so much just marketing in general out there that it becomes less about the marketing itself and more about your brand or the relationship that you're building with your audience. And that's what becomes really excellent marketing that you can be proud of. So I don't know if that's the most interesting thing I've learned. I think they kind of pointed that out to me, but I think it's the most interesting thing I've observed about where marketing has headed over the last year.
Wow, as you were saying, that rang so true. You said KPI blind, and I was thinking KPI tunnel vision, right? It's
exactly. Yep.
In 2015, 2016, I feel like all I heard about was MQLs, the SQLs, the numbers, the this and that. And I talked to a marketer. I always see him as a kind of leading the pack in many ways. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Jeff Soriano. And we had a conversation not a month ago, I think, where he was saying, man, you know what? I'm just done. I'm done with the SQLs, the MQLs. At the end of the day, it's just about opportunities in the pipeline. Middle are terms that certain people made up along the way to kind of give a common language for us all to talk about and share, but that somehow became tied to incentives and money, and it kind of polluted it just polluted and kind of changed how we use those types of numbers. And so he was a big proponent of going back to when that terminology didn't even exist maybe 10 years ago, mm-hmm. At least in the common rhetoric of marketing. So yeah, that was interesting. I think that's all the time we have for today, but Justine, would you like to leave us with anything?
I would just say go forth and make better email.
Nice. All right, folks. Well, that's it for us today here at Marketing Talk with Justine Jordan from Litmus. I'm Rodrigo Fuentes from Listen Loop, and join us for our next session at blog.listenloop.com. Thanks.